The cold metal bites my fingers, digging into the grime coating the underside of the frame. My breath hitches, a sharp, ragged sound in the quiet garage. It's small, black, magnetic. Sticking there, hidden, just above the exhaust pipe. Not dirt. Not debris. Something placed. Deliberately. My heart doesn't just beat. It slams against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to break free. A hot wave washes over me, starting in my gut, crawling up my throat, a sickening mix of terror and something else. Something cold and hard, like glacial ice forming deep inside my core. This isn't the forgotten bolt. This isn't junk from the road. This is intentional. This is violation. This is confirmation. A confirmation I never wanted, not really, not this way. The air in the garage feels thick, suffocating, smelling of gasoline and stale motor oil, the scent suddenly laced with betrayal. My hand is shaking as I pull it off, the magnet's reluctant grip finally releasing its hold. It fits in my palm, a little black rectangle, innocent-looking and utterly damning. The weight of it feels immense, heavier than lead. My world, the solid ground I thought I stood on, begins to tilt, to splinter, the cracks forming right here, in the dim light of my own garage, under the car he drives every day. This tiny device, insignificant to anyone else, is an earthquake rumbling beneath my feet. And he's walking towards the door now, whistling, oblivious. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before this felt comfortable. Solid. Maybe a little predictable, but isn't that the goal? A quiet rhythm. Mornings filled with the smell of coffee and toast, the gentle clatter of dishes as we both moved through our routines. Evenings settled into the couch, watching familiar shows, the comfortable silence between us a sign of shared history, shared peace. We built this life brick by brick over 15 years. A nice house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with old trees and kids who played outside. Stable jobs. Friends we saw on weekends. Vacations planned months in advance. He was everything I thought I wanted. Strong, kind, funny. He remembered my favorite flowers, knew how I liked my coffee. We talked. We planned. We were a unit. That's what I believed. We were a team navigating the messy business of being alive. There wasn't grand romance every single day, not after 15 years, but there was a deep, quiet love. A foundation built on trust. On knowing the other person had your back no matter what. That was the promise. The unspoken vow woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. I felt secure. Content. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't searching for cracks in the pavement. I was walking the path we'd built, trusting it would lead us, together, into the future. The disruption wasn't a sudden, dramatic event, not at first. It was subtle. A shift in the wind, so slight you almost dismiss it as your imagination. He started working later. And later. Big project, he'd say, his eyes just a little too tired, his explanations just a little too vague. He'd been a workhorse before, dedicated, but this felt different. His phone became an extension of his hand, always face down, notifications silenced. Quick glances, a protective shield whenever I came near. He'd disappear into the other room to take calls, his voice low, hushed. When I'd ask who it was, he'd give a generic answer, a colleague, a client. Nothing I could pin down. Nothing definitive. But the feeling was building. A low hum of unease beneath the surface of our quiet life. It started small like a pebble in my shoe. Annoying but manageable. I told myself I was overthinking. Stress from work. The pressure of being the primary earner, I reasoned. Men handle stress differently. Maybe he just needed space, quiet time. Maybe I was being clingy. I tried to push the feeling down, to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. But the pebble became a stone. He started picking fights over nothing. Leaving dishes out, a misplaced key, a comment I made that he twisted into an accusation of nagging. Small things designed, it felt, to create distance. To justify absence. Our conversations became shorter, more superficial. The comfortable silence turned into a vast, empty space. He'd come home, exhausted, irritable, disappearing into his phone until he fell asleep on the couch. The intimacy, physical and emotional, began to wither. We stopped sharing stories about our day. We stopped laughing at silly things together. The light in his eyes when he looked at me had dimmed. Or maybe it was just my perception, tainted by the growing suspicion. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly analyzing his moods, his words, his silences. Trying to find the key to whatever was happening, trying to fix it, trying to understand. Was it me? Had I changed? Had I done something wrong? The self-doubt was a corrosive acid, eating away at my confidence, my peace of mind. I tried talking to him, gently at first. Is everything okay? You seem distant, he'd sigh, annoyed. Just tired. Stop analyzing everything. My early attempts to understand were clumsy, born of desperation and confusion. I'd ask him about his late nights, trying to sound casual. Still working on that project? Must be huge, he'd grunt noncommittally, his eyes fixed on his screen. I'd suggest a date night, hoping to reconnect, to find the man I married. He'd agree reluctantly, then cancel last minute with a flimsy excuse. I started paying closer attention to his car mileage, the time he left, the time he returned. Trying to make the pieces fit, trying to find a logical explanation that wasn't the one my gut screamed at me. I felt like a detective in my own life, sifting through clues that were just out of reach, my hand trembling as I held each one up to the light, praying it wasn't what I feared. I checked his shirts for strange smells, his pockets for receipts, his phone for anything. Each search felt sordid, beneath me, chipping away at the person I was. I hated myself for it, for the suspicion that was turning me into someone I didn't recognize. But I couldn't stop. The not knowing was a constant low-grade fever. The uncertainty was a physical pain. He noticed my anxiety, my sleepless nights, my inability to focus. Instead of offering comfort, he weaponized it. You're acting crazy, he'd say, his voice flat, weary. You're imagining things. There's nothing going on. You need to calm down. You're stressed, he said it so often, with such conviction, that I started to question myself. Was my imagination running wild? Was I projecting my own insecurities onto him? The gaslighting was insidious, a slow poison eroding my sense of reality. My friends noticed I was withdrawn, jumpy. When I hinted at my fears, they'd offer reassurances, tell me he was a good guy, tell me I was probably just stressed. Even the people I trusted were, unknowingly, reinforcing the narrative that I was the problem. The isolation deepened. I felt like I was drowning, flailing in a sea of doubt, his voice a steady drumbeat telling me the water was just my imagination. The rising challenges weren't just emotional, they became strategic. The more I questioned, the more elaborate his lies became. The more I pulled away in confusion and hurt, the more he justified his distance. It was a vicious cycle, tightening its grip around us. I tried couples counseling, begging him to come, to talk, to fix whatever was broken. He refused. Said it was my problem, I was the one who needed help. Said I was paranoid. The word echoed in my head, paranoid. Was I? I started writing things down. Times he left, times he came home. Excuses given, compared to snippets of conversation I overheard or things that didn't add up. The timeline was inconsistent. The stories had holes. A Tuesday night meeting he swore kept him until midnight, but a street camera I happened to notice showed his car turning onto our street at 9:30. Small things. Deniable things. But they accumulated, a mountain of inconsistencies buried under layers of his calm denial. The emotional toll was immense. I couldn't sleep. I lost weight. My focus at work suffered. I felt like a ghost in my own house, watching him, always watching, searching for a sign, a slip, a crack in the facade. He seemed almost indifferent to my suffering, as if my pain was an inconvenient byproduct of his life, easily dismissed. His coldness was a new layer of hurt, a stark contrast to the warmth he used to radiate. The man I loved felt like a stranger, or worse, an actor playing the part of my husband, poorly. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe I was going crazy. The thought terrified me more than the possibility of his betrayal. Was I losing my mind? The midpoint shift came not with a dramatic discovery, but with a quiet, chilling realization. I was sitting alone in the living room late one night, the house silent, listening to the clock tick. He was working late again. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. But this time, instead of collapsing inward, something shifted. A cold anger, like steel hardening, replaced the fear. I wasn't crazy. The evidence wasn't in snippets of conversations or inconsistent timelines. The evidence was in his eyes, in his touch that no longer lingered, in his deliberate distance. His dismissal of my feelings, his insistence that I was the problem, wasn't just denial. It was a tactic, a way to keep me off balance, to make me doubt my own sanity, so I wouldn't look for the real truth. He wasn't just avoiding conversation. He was actively hiding something. And in that moment of cold clarity, I stopped being a woman trying to understand. I became a woman looking for proof. Irrefutable proof. Proof that would silence his denials forever. Proof that would show him that I saw him, really saw him, despite his elaborate performance. The shift was tectonic. The ground beneath me settled, no longer trembling with doubt, but hardening into resolve. The deepening crisis began when I started looking actively. It felt like stepping into a dark alleyway. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every quiet moment felt like I might be caught. I started small. Checked his email on a shared computer. Nothing useful, passwords changed, or nothing incriminating sent. Checked his phone records, numbers I didn't recognize, but nothing I could trace back definitively. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on a vast beach. The paranoia he'd accused me of now felt real, but it wasn't about his fidelity anymore. It was about the act of searching itself. The fear of him finding out I was looking. Because if he found out, the gaslighting would intensify. Or worse, he would become genuinely angry, maybe even dangerous. I felt isolated, alone with my suspicion and my secret investigation. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a battleground. Every room held tension. Every shared meal was a performance. We were two strangers living under the same roof, locked in a silent war neither of us openly acknowledged. My attempts to find proof felt increasingly desperate. I considered hiring a private investigator, but the thought felt too drastic, too real. Like admitting defeat, admitting my marriage was truly over. I couldn't bring myself to cross that line, not yet. Instead, I relied on my own limited abilities, feeling increasingly foolish. I started taking note of his car's location when he was home. Where he parked, if the odometer reading matched his claimed trips. Tedious, mundane details that might, just might, reveal something. I felt like I was losing my grip, the obsession consuming me. Work became a blur. My friends seemed further away than ever. I existed only in this space of suspicion and searching. All seemed lost. I found myself sitting in parking lots, watching his office building, feeling utterly pathetic. What was I doing? What had I become? The man I loved, the life we built, was dissolving before my eyes, and I felt powerless to stop it. Then came the turning point, the moment of grim determination fueled by sheer exhaustion and a refusal to live in this state of agonizing uncertainty any longer. I was watching him leave one morning, briefcase in hand, kissing me goodbye with a peck on the cheek that felt utterly empty. He got into his car, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. And a thought, cold and sharp, sliced through the fog of my despair. If I couldn't track him, maybe his car could. Not its internal GPS. I didn't know how to access that, assuming it wasn't wiped. But what if he was tracking it? Or something else? The thought was outlandish, born of spy movies and desperation, but it lodged itself in my mind. I needed something concrete. Something undeniable. And maybe, just maybe, it was right under my nose. Or under his car. It was a long shot. A crazy idea. But I was past caring about appearing crazy. I just needed the truth. The decision was made in an instant. A switch flipped. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but now it was overshadowed by a cold, relentless focus. I would find out, whatever it took. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple and terrifying. Wait for him to leave. Then get under the car. I'd never done anything like it. I wasn't mechanically inclined. But the thought of that little black box, tucked away, silently recording, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. It was the physical manifestation of my suspicion, the possibility of concrete proof I desperately craved. I waited until he was long gone, the house unnervingly silent. I put on old clothes, grabbed a flashlight and a small wrench, just in case. My hands were shaking as I opened the garage door. The car sat there, innocent-looking, a familiar part of our life, now imbued with sinister potential. I knelt down, the concrete cold beneath my knees, and peered underneath. It was dark, dusty, cobweb-filled. Nothing obvious. I had no idea what I was looking for. A white? A box? How would it be attached? My heart hammered against my ribs. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, made me jump, convinced he'd somehow returned, caught me. I started at the front, inching my way back, running my hand along the frame, feeling for anything that didn't belong. My fingers brushed against grease, dirt, small stones kicked up from the road. Nothing. Panic began to bubble up. This was futile. I was crazy, just like he said. I almost gave up, almost crawled out, and went back inside, pretending this never happened, trying to bury the suspicion again. But the thought of going back to that suffocating doubt, that constant questioning, spurred me on. I crawled further back, towards the rear axle. The air was thicker, heavier, smelling of exhaust. My fingers scraped against something hard, smooth, stuck firmly to the metal frame. Not a bolt. Not part of the car. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it from miles away. I fumbled for the flashlight, my shaking hand aiming the beam into the darkness. And there it was. Small, black, magnetic. Just sticking there. Pulling it off was a moment frozen in time. The slight resistance of the magnet, the dull click as it detached, the feel of it heavy and solid in my palm. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a physical manifestation of deceit. Of his double life. Of my worst fears confirmed. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. I crawled out from under the car, my clothes dirty, my knees sore, but my mind strangely clear. The fear was still present, a cold residue, but it was mixed now with a surge of something powerful. Not just anger, but a grim, cold satisfaction. He thought he was hiding. He thought he was controlling the narrative. He thought he was making me crazy. But he'd been sloppy. He'd left a trail. And I had found it. I didn't confront him immediately. The discovery was too big, too shocking. I needed a moment to process it, to understand what it meant. I took the tracker inside, my dirty hands careful not to drop it. I cleaned it off, a small, nondescript box. It had a button, a light, and a port. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands still trembling. It required software. I downloaded it, my mind racing. What would I find? Evidence of where he'd been? Late nights at the office? Trips to a specific address. The software opened, revealing a map. A timeline. Months of data. My breath hitched. It wasn't just locations. It was speed, duration, stops. His whole life outside the house, meticulously recorded. I started scrolling through the data, my eyes scanning the map, recognizing familiar roads, then unfamiliar ones. Trips to his office. Trips to the gym. Trips to places I'd never heard of. Restaurants. Parks. And one specific address, visited frequently, late at night, for hours at a time. An apartment building in a neighborhood far from his office, far from any place he had reason to be. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. This wasn't just late nights at work. This wasn't just stress. This was another life. Another woman. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming. It painted a picture of a carefully constructed deception, a life lived in parallel to the one he shared with me. But then I noticed something else in the data. Something that didn't fit the narrative of simple infidelity. There were trips at odd hours, to industrial areas, to shipping ports, to places that made no sense for a man in his profession. Trips that lasted only a short time, late at night. The frequency of these trips was increasing in recent weeks. And the locations, they weren't random. They were specific. Warehouse districts. Empty lots near freight yards. These weren't the movements of a man meeting a lover. They were the movements of a man involved in something else. Something clandestine. Something illegal. The plot twist unfolded as I dug deeper into the tracker's data. It wasn't just recording his movements. It was a sophisticated, two-way device. It wasn't just on his car. He had installed it. But why? If he was the one cheating, why would he put a tracker on his own car? Unless he thought I was doing something. Unless he was trying to catch me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just deceiving me. He was actively investigating me, paranoid about my activities while leading his own double life. The sheer audacity, the twisted projection of his own guilt, was breathtaking. But then the truly blindsiding revelation came from the unusual locations. I cross-referenced the addresses with public records. Warehouses listed under shell corporations. Empty industrial buildings with no public business listed. It clicked. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the sudden trips. He wasn't just having an affair. He was involved in something far more serious. The tracker data, meant perhaps to monitor me or even just his own clandestine movements, had inadvertently given me a map to his criminal activity. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal. The big project wasn't work. It was this. Whatever this was. And the tracker, the tool he'd used to facilitate his deception and maybe even monitor me, was now my evidence. Not just of infidelity, but of a secret life that could land him in prison. The climax arrived the next evening. He came home, tired but putting on a show of normalcy. The smell of a strange perfume clung faintly to his jacket. He asked about my day, his voice distant. I felt a cold detachment watching him perform. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger, this liar, this criminal. I waited until after dinner, until the comfortable silence settled, the kind that used to feel safe and now felt like a suffocating lie. I sat on the couch, the little black tracker hidden in my pocket, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. He was scrolling through his phone, a slight, dismissive smile playing on his lips. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady calm. It was a stranger's voice, even to me. He sighed, without looking up. "Yeah? What is it?" "Still worried about?" "Nothing." His tone, condescending, dismissive, fueled the fire in my gut. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tracker. I held it up, letting the small black rectangle sit on my open palm. The light glinted off its plastic casing. His eyes flicked up from the screen. His smile faltered. He looked at the device in my hand, then at my face. The color drained from his cheeks. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "What?" "What is that?" he stammered, his voice suddenly thin. "Funny," I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I was going to ask you the same thing." I stood up, walked towards him, the tracker still on my palm. "I found it today. Under the car." He scrambled back slightly on the couch, his eyes wide, fixed on the device. "Under the car? How? Why were you looking under the car?" "I don't know." I lied, the life feeling strangely effortless. "Just cleaning, I guess. Saw something stuck there. Picked it off." I held it closer. "Looks like a GPS tracker, doesn't it?" He stared at it, then at me, his face a mask of pure terror. The cocky dismissiveness was gone, replaced by raw, naked fear. His breath hitched, loud in the silent room. That's not mine," he choked out, a pathetic attempt at denial. "I've never seen that before." I almost laughed. The lie was so transparent, so desperate. "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because the data on it. It tells a different story." His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, a way out. His face was ashen. His hands were shaking. Data? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Yes, I said, stepping closer.
Data.
Months of it. Where the car's been. Late nights. Weekends, I watched him, the cold satisfaction settling deeper in my chest. I've seen the map, you know. The trips to that apartment building. Address is 17B on Elm Street, right? That's quite a frequent destination for someone supposedly working late. He flinched as if I'd struck him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But that's not the most interesting part. I continued, my voice dropping slightly, low and chillingly calm. The really fascinating trips are the ones to the industrial district.
To the ports.
Those little late-night detours that don't show up on your work calendar. I leaned in closer, my eyes locked on his. Those warehouses don't seem to be listed in the company directory. That's when it happened. Not a collapse of just his lies about the affair, but a total implosion. His eyes glazed over. His body went rigid for a second, then seemed to crumple. He gasped, a harsh, rattling sound, and pitched forward, collapsing onto the coffee table with a crash of wood and glass. The tracker tumbled from my hand, hitting the floor unnoticed. He lay there unmoving, amidst the shattered glass and splintered wood, his breathing shallow and ragged. It wasn't a performance. It was a physical breakdown. The weight of 15 years of deception, the affair, and the far more serious secret I had just revealed I knew had crushed him. He hadn't just been caught cheating. He'd been exposed for the criminal he was, caught using his own tracking device, his own tool of control and concealment, to provide the exact evidence I needed to destroy him. He thought he was tracking me, or just tracking his illegal movements for his own purposes, and instead, he'd handed me the map to his undoing. He was utterly blindsided, not by the infidelity, but by the fact that I knew about the deeper, darker truth, and that his own actions had provided the proof. The immediate aftermath was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. I called for help, my voice strangely detached, reporting an accident, a collapse. The house was filled with strangers, paramedics, police. I answered their questions calmly, robotically. Yes, he collapsed. Yes, the coffee table broke. No, I don't know why. He'd been stressed lately. The tracker lay on the floor, ignored, lost in the chaos. I didn't point it out.
Not yet.
The time wasn't right. He was taken away in an ambulance. The house fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not empty, but heavy with the weight of what had just happened, of what had been revealed. I cleaned up the shattered glass, the splinters of wood, moving through the motions like a sleepwalker. The tracker was still there. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. This little device, the instrument of his potential control over me, the silent witness to his secret life, had become my liberation. The days that followed were surreal. He was in the hospital undergoing tests. I visited him, sitting by his bedside, watching the man who had been my husband, now frail and broken. I didn't mention the tracker. I didn't mention the data. He mumbled apologies, confessions about being stressed, about making mistakes. He didn't mention the other woman or the illegal activities.
Not yet.
He was still in shock, still trying to process the total collapse of his carefully constructed world. The twist continued to unfold in the quiet aftermath. The data from the tracker wasn't just proof for me. It was leverage. Against him, yes, but also against anyone he was involved with. I downloaded the full data, secured it. I didn't go to the police immediately. This wasn't just about punishing him. It was about securing my future. The information on that tracker was worth far more than an angry divorce settlement. It was power. He was discharged from the hospital, physically recovering, but emotionally devastated. He came home to a house that was no longer his. My face was different. My eyes held a cold knowledge he couldn't comprehend. I showed him the printed maps, the highlighted locations, the timelines. I showed him the public records linked to those addresses. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just presented the facts, laid bare by the very tool he had used to hide them. You weren't just cheating, I said, my voice flat. You were using this tracker to coordinate something illegal. And you brought that into our lives, into our home. He looked at the printouts, at the undeniable evidence from his own device, and his face crumbled again. The second collapse wasn't physical, but it was just as complete. The raw terror returned.
What?
What are you going to do? He whispered, fear replacing every other emotion. That depends, I said, my voice hard. You use this tracker, this symbol of control and deceit, to bring your lies into our life. Now, I'm using the information it gave me to take my life back. And yours, if necessary. The plot twist wasn't just him getting caught. It was the nature of how he got caught, and the fact that the infidelity was just the tip of the iceberg. He thought he was managing two lives, maybe even suspecting I was somehow disrupting them, using his own tool. But that tool exposed a secret far worse than he ever thought I would uncover, and it gave me the power to orchestrate his complete downfall, not just as a husband, but as a man with a criminal double life. I held all the cards, handed to me by his own paranoia and sloppy methods. The aftermath isn't neat. Divorce is messy, painful, even when you have irrefutable proof. But the leverage the tracker data provided was immense. It meant I wasn't just fighting for half of our shared assets. I was negotiating from a position of strength, holding the threat of exposure for his criminal activities over his head. He agreed to everything. The house, the savings, a generous settlement. He was desperate to keep his real secret buried, the one far more damaging than the affair. The other woman disappeared from the picture, a minor detail in the face of potential prison time. The resolution isn't happy, not exactly. It's more
Clean.
a surgical excision of a poisoned limb. I watched him sign the papers, a hollowed-out version of the man I married. He lost everything, his marriage, his reputation, his future, all because he underestimated me, called me crazy, and left a damning trail with the very device he used to try and control his deception. He walked into his own trap, built from his own tools. I stand in the quiet house now, the divorce final. It feels empty, but not lonely. It feels like possibility. The pain of the betrayal is still there, a dull ache, but it's no longer consuming. It's a scar, a reminder of where I've been. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. And sometimes, being right hurts more than being wrong. But it also sets you free. The little black tracker sits in a box in the closet, a silent testament to the day my world imploded, and I found the strength and the unexpected tool to build a new one from the wreckage. He thought he was hiding.
He thought he was safe.
He thought he was the one with the secrets. But his secrets became my weapon, and his attempts to control the situation led directly to his downfall. The crazy woman wasn't the one who lost. The betrayer, blind to the real danger he'd created for himself, was. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life. Thank you for being here.